CAGET Cat, and today we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons idea. Basically, recently they announced D&D would be having a new iteration, and before they announced it, I actually had like a whole 60 ideas series. So this is kind of like a continuation of that series, but also kind of accounting for the fact that all the information we have for the new iteration of D&D is that it's backwards compatible 5e and books, but it'll be its own game system entirely, so it's kind of confusing, but yeah. Anyway, so previously I made a video a while ago, like season 5 or so, on my channel about like a race revamp. Basically, races in D&D are like the fantasy species, like elves and dwarves. Based on that video, I wanted to see things like having a race that could have two, if you have a race, for example, like an elf, or you're playing an elf that had parents that had two different sub-races, like a sea elf and a high elf. You couldn't really do that with the 5th edition rules. And also, like, if you wanted, like, say, half elf, but you had, maybe sea elf traits and, like, and the other parent, there was another race that had, like, half sub-race, and you wanted traits from both parents' sub-races, It's hard to explain, but, like, it was a lot of, like, really customizable race options. So I feel like if it's backwards compatible 5e, it needs to be a little bit more simplified, because it's using 5e's rules, but it's updating them, kind of. So, this is a new iteration from what we can kind of tell, so, yeah. I'm planning on also maybe making a YouTube short that is identical to this video. Well, it's not identical, but it's like all of the information, but just crammed in like 59 seconds, basically. So, this will be the more detailed version of that video. But I'll make this one first, so I don't know if the other one will actually happen. But that's just something you might want to look out for on my channel. But anyway, so yeah. So idea for I'm completely not just the whole race revamp. Let's just say it uses the 5e's rules for races, except we'll assume that the fact because the newer books is just the +2, +1, or 3 +1s, the different stats for race modifiers. But let's just assume those don't exist anymore, because it's just a plus. You just get those built into the ability scores when you start rolling for them, instead of it being tied to races, because I feel like that's gonna be something they're gonna phase out but those, in the next iteration of D&D in 2024. So, anyway, my idea for how the half races will work is this. Basically, they have tons of sub races, and you pick 2 of them for your character. If that makes sense. For example, let's just say you want to play a half elf. Instead of there being a half elf race, you'd have a race that has like 10 or so sub races. One of them could be human, one of them could be elf, for example. Let's say like one's like half human, one's a half elf, for example. And you pick. Here's how the half race would work: is that you get to pick 2 of the 2 sub races, basically, and you get the stats from both of them on top of some base racial features. The race probably won't have any base racial features; it'll all be based on the 2 sub races you pick. But basically, for example, if you're just human and elf, you basically get pretty similar stats to the half elf, but with some modifications, of course, because it's not its own separate race, and because human could say beautiful orc, and half orc and half elf barely share any same stats of each other, if that makes sense. But you get kind of what I mean, right? So the idea is basically for, like, say, a human. I want to play a human, half elf. You'll pick the human and elf sub-races for this half race. And you'll get, like, some of the, you get some of the features and stuff. And based on how sub-races work, and you can actually get something which is to add even more sub-races onto the half race. Kind of like how elves have tons of sub-races and more in cadence and other books. It's like ridiculous. So it's very, like, a new elf sub-race slash. So, like, a new race that has, like, elf in the title that's coming. That's not Russian kind of. I'm really confused because it has all the elf default race features, but then the other new ones, because that's basically just a sub-race, but it counts as a race. It's kind of confusing in the new Armstrong. But basically, like, this also means that because of the half system, you can play a combination between any things that you couldn't do before. Like, if one character's a half elf, half orc, you can now do that, even though it wouldn't make sense to Forgotten Realms lore and stuff. So maybe like some lore things would say some combinations may not be possible in your setting or something like that. Note or something like that. But And that could also mean on top of those 3 can get more maybe those would be the core players core rulebook ones. But maybe you can add a few more ones in. And maybe there'll be 2 versions of the half race, the half race medium and the half race small. So half race small will have things like gnomes, halflings, and dwarfs in it, for example. in the half-race small version. And the half-race medium would be humans, elves, and orcs in the player's handbook version. And they could add more on later, like maybe books of the Volo's guide could add maybe half to backseat, which I feel like people would really want, or half Triton, If that makes kind of sense, so yeah. Anyway, that kind of explains that, but I have more stuff to talk about as well. Basically, the other thing I wanted to talk about was two specific races I find real interesting: the Tiefling and the Azamar. Tiefling's in Player's Handbook, Azamar's in Volo's Guide to Monsters. We're thinking about the Azamars actually has sub-races, and we're thinking about Tiefling is that the Player's Handbook doesn't have sub-races, but Sword Coast Adventures getting more Arcane, so we'll have replacement features, like you can replace some features and get other ones. And these are kind of how the sub-races work for Tiefling, so you only need to get one Tiefling sub-race in the Player's Handbook, and then all the other ones are more Arcane and Sword Coast. Which is kind of funny how that works, but let's just assume that I used the half-race idea, but we had small, medium versions. Now let's do the Azamar and Tiefling remake. How that would work is, we'll use Tiefling as our example, but this also applies to Azamar. Basically, the Tiefling it's all its sub-races. So when you're choosing this, you get to choose one of the races from the medium half race. Basically, you get to choose one sub-race from there, and then you choose one sub-race from the Tieflings list, which includes basically all the Devil Lords and stuff, maybe some other things, Devil and Demon Lords, stuff like that, and some other sub-races. But because it's a different race entirely than the medium half race, it could also have it also have some, the half race has some default racial features, and the two sub-race features. The Tiefling will have different default, race features, and then core race features, and then you can choose the Devil or Demon parentage and the other normal race from the half race book. So that'll be an interesting idea right there. In Azamar, will be kind of same, like you choose something like with the Player's Handbook, for example, you have the human, elf, and orc, as you get their half sub-race stats. And then you also, for the Azamar side, you get to choose Protector, Scourge, or Fallen. And on top of having different base racial features than the normal half race. So that's kind of an idea I've had, I just came up with like at midnight, and it's like a little bit after midnight when I'm recording this, so yeah. Interesting idea. And see, with a lot of new viewers on my channel, probably because I'm branching out to a lot of different content, and it's kind of weird because I barely any of my returning viewers. I just grew so many viewers recently, but yeah. Anyway, this is the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe to CAGET on YouTube. And maybe look out for the short version of this, where I just basically explain the idea in very simple text instead of getting you more details. And peace.